Recording in progress.
Hello. Act 2, Scene 3. Let's talk about that. As you got your book open, one of the things I would do is you're kind of getting a lay of the land here is to just write some of these notes even in the top margin of your book so that you can remember to look for those things. And then I'm going to kind of go to the text itself and talk through some stuff. So it is the morning. Now, let's say this is a big problem, right? And kudos, props to Romeo and Juliet for considering to pull in the friar. All of Verona is in chaos over this conflict between the Montagues and the Capulets. And so the friar, they are familiar with, they know him. Obviously, the friar has had a prior relationship with Romeo, prior conversations. He knows about Rosaline. And of course, if they're going to get married, they need the friar's help. So Romeo the next morning goes to the friar. And we know that it's morning because of the friar's language. He starts off talking about the morning, and we'll look at the text in just a second. And cue the roosters, cue the sun coming across the sky. It's a new day, if you will. And so this is scene 3. And so the things I'd like you to look for, and this won't make sense necessarily prior to reading it, but just note that that life and death theme is going to continue in this scene. The friar's going to have a basket, and he's collecting herbs, collecting flowers, and he's going to talk about the medicinal properties of flowers, but then also some flowers are toxic or poisonous. So life and death potentials there. We'll cover that in just a second. And then also, he brings up these contrasting ideas of virtue and vice. So good and bad. Virtue being all the things that are true and good and beautiful, and vice being things like these would be considered sins to the medievals, things that would cause you to stumble or make a mistake or mess up or hurt somebody. Vices, right? Selfishness and greed and anger and malice and things like that. Okay, so look, there's a contrast there. Whenever you see contrasts in a story, in writing, it's worth stopping and pausing. Just park there for a minute and try to figure out what's going on. Why are these things being juxtaposed? Why are they next to each other? We'll come back to this slide. I think I'd like to share with you the text itself. Let's dive in and talk about that. So this is hopefully you can see that. Sorry. Act 2, Scene 3, the Friar Lawrence's cell. So Friar Lawrence says, the gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night. Morning, night, we got a contrast. So, it's morning. Checkering the eastern clouds with a streak of light. And flecked darkness. So the darkness here has to flee. Whenever light comes around, darkness, like they can't exist, right, with each other. Darkness has to flee when there's light. And the darkness, like a drunkard, reels from fourth day's path and tightens fiery wheels. Okay, so he compares darkness to a drunkard. Like it's trying to leave. And imagine it stumbling out. And he says, from Titan's fiery wheel. So there's a picture over here, if you will. The Greek god, the sun god, Helios, is driving the chariot, and behind him is the sun. He's bringing it across the sky. And so he says the night is reeling away from Helios's chariot. Now, before, so whenever we see air, E-R-E, that means like before. Before the sun advance his burning eye, the day to cheer and night's dank dew to dry, I must fill this basket, if you will, with weeds and precious flowers. So that's what he's doing. And then he's going to give us some commentary. The earth, that's nature's mother, is her tomb. Again, death language, interesting. He's talking about a tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. So womb is where something grows. So he's putting womb by tomb, life and death. And from her womb, children of diverse kinds. So lots of things grow from the earth's tomb. womb. So that's just an interesting way of saying that life comes from death. When you think about planting, like in the spring, I'm going to go and plant all my seeds, put them in the ground, and it will look like nothing. It will be buried. It will be underneath the dirt in the dark. And something is going to happen. Life is going to begin unseen, unnoticed, unobserved. And that will be happening in the darkness. This idea of like the grave of death. But really, life is going to come out of this grave. And he says there's all kinds of different things that come from from Mother Nature, right? You'll be reading it yourself, but I'm going to just kind of show you. He gives a few examples: herbs, plants, stones, and their true qualities. He says this, but to earth some special good doth give, nor aught so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts. Okay, so some things have dual purposes, right? Like he talks about a flower. And a flower, when you smell it, it's so beautiful. It smells amazing, but then if you ate it, it would kill you. So there's like two sides of the coin here. And he says some things from nature revolt from their true birth, stumbling on abuse. Some things that are meant for good can be used for evil purposes or can be twisted or used in the wrong way. And here's that quote that I mentioned at the beginning. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied. So virtue, good, can turn bad when it's misapplied, used in the wrong way. If you ever in your life can think of you trying to help somebody, like I was just trying to help, but it made it worse. And vice, sometimes by action dignified. That's an interesting phrase. Sometimes you do something that could be wrong, but it has a good intent, I guess. Maybe I think of the Bible when Rahab lied. Now, a lie is always wrong. It's a sin, right? But her intent was to protect and save. And that doesn't mean God looks at the lie and says, that's okay, you can lie sometimes. That's not at all the interpretation. But that lying, like they're not here, was a vice. But by the very action, her intent is dignified. That might be a kind of a crude example, I'm not sure, but that's kind of where I'm going with this. Now, so this is really a loaded sentence. Virtue can be vice if you use it wrongly. And vice sometimes can produce good ends, is what he's saying. It's kind of tricky. Now, I think it's really important that the play tells us that Romeo walks in. Romeo's there. Imagine him on stage, unbeknownst to the friar, while the friar's saying the next section. And I would like to look at this next section because the flower here it's not too big of a leap to compare that to Romeo. So he's holding up a flower and he says, within this infant rind of this small flower, poison hath residence and medicine power. So a virtue and a vice. It's got virtue in it. There's a good in it, right? There's some medicinal. For this being smelt, with that part cheers each part. So it has some kind of medicinal quality if you smell it, right? There are things that in my home I'll boil rosemary because that's supposed to have a calming, I don't know if it works or not, but a calming effect. I'll boil that on my stove. We do that at Christmas time. I'll put cinnamon in a pot, and it just has a good smell to it. But it also has poison, right? If you eat it, it slays all senses with the heart. So he says this flower is good and bad. You can use it for good or you can use it for bad. And then he says this. He makes the leap to man, and you can put Romeo in this spot. He doesn't know Romeo's there yet. But he says, two such opposed kings, poison and medicine, camp themselves in man, just like in herbs. And he calls that grace and rude will. And by rude here, he doesn't mean, let me see if I'm in the right place. He doesn't mean like mean or unkind. He means base or think untethered or unbridled, if you will. Unbridled will. And where the worser is predominant, full soon the canker death eats up that plant. Okay. So in man, he has the potential for virtue and also has the potential for vice. Cue Romeo. Good morning, Father. Benedicte, that just means hello, right? Blessings. And you'll enjoy reading this. I think it's quite fun. The friar's reaction to Romeo, because he knows Romeo is in love with Rosaline. He knows that. He's talked to him already. And yet Romeo's like, no, it's just yesterday. Today's Juliet. So the friar is going to say, it looks like you've been up all night long. And Romeo says, yes, I have. And the friar's like, please tell me it wasn't with Rosaline, please. And he's just moving too fast. But Romeo says, I've forgotten Rosaline. He has been struck again by Cupid. So the language, I'm looking at my book, I got it right here. With Rosaline, my ghostly father, no, he says, I forgot that name. Forgot all about her and her woe, all the pain from that. That's my good son, but where have you been? And he says, I'll tell you before you ask me again. I have been feasting with my enemy, where on a sudden one hath wounded me, that's Cupid, that's by me wounded. Both are remedies within thy help, and holy physic lies. So he tells him, I bear no hatred, blessed man, for lo, my intercession likewise steads my foe. He no longer hates the Capulets. That's gone. His love has eradicated that. He doesn't want to get revenge on them at all or fight with them at all. And he is seeking help from the friar. Within thy help and holy physic lies. And Friar Lawrence says, be plain. What? He says, what? Be plain and homely in thy drift. Tell me, talk direct. Riddling confession finds riddling shrift. Shift or shrift? Is it shrift? Forgiveness, right? Like, I don't quite know what you're confessing here, so I don't quite know how to absolve you of this as a priest, right? So Romeo says, plainly know my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet. As mine on hers, so hers is set on mine. And all combined, save what thou must combine by holy marriage. When and where and how we met, we wooed and made exchange of all. I'll tell you that as we pass. But this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. Hello. Da, 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 da. Wedding bells. I'm still floored. They just met. Okay, so Friar Lawrence is floored too. Oh, St. Francis, what a change is here. What? Come again? Is Rosaline, whom thou didst love so dear, so soon forsaken? Oh, young men's love then lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes. Yea, Sue Maria, he says. What a deal of brine. So brine would be like salty, like tears, right? He says, you've shed all these tears on your cheeks for Rosaline. How much salt water has been thrown away in waste to season love that of it doth not taste. You cried and cried and cried over Rosaline. I don't know. Rosaline. The sun has not thy sighs from heaven cleared. Like, there's still tears on your face. Your old groans ring in my ancient ears. Lo, here upon thy cheek the stain doth sit of an old tear that hasn't been washed off yet. That is so funny. I think these lines are hilarious. The friar is like, you are just crying. I can hear you crying in my ears over Rosaline. Your face still has, like, your tear. What? That's what the friar is saying. And then he says, women may fall when there's no strength in men. There's a good commonplace quote for you. Romeo says, thou chidest me off for loving you. You told me that you chidest me for loving Rosaline. And then Friar Lawrence says this, and I think it's so important, for doting, not for loving. Pupil mine. Oh, the friar knows the difference. The friar knows the difference between like super hyperbolic romantic poetry as opposed to just genuine real love. He knows he was just doting on Rosaline and not truly in love. And Romeo says, you baited me. You told me, you advised me to bury my love. There's more grave language. Not in a grave, said Friar Lawrence. To lay one in, another one out to have. Romeo, I pray thee chide not. She whom I love now doth grace for grace and love for love allow. The other didn't. There you go. Rosaline didn't return his affection. Would he be asking the friar to marry him and Rosaline today if Rosaline had returned his affection? Just a question. The friar is telling Romeo that he is very hasty, that this is moving pretty fast. And it is. Romeo says, I pray, chide me not. We read that already. I think this is really important. Let's take a look at what Friar Lawrence says. Oh, she knew well thy love did read by rote and couldn't spell. All right, just pause on that for a minute. Who's the she? Rosaline. She knew well thy love was reading by rote, but couldn't spell. Rosaline knew she was only acting. He was only acting the part, that this wasn't true love. That's what the friar is saying. She knew. She knew that you were just reading it by rote. You were saying the words, but you didn't really even know how to spell those words. So Friar Lawrence has a good feel on the Rosaline situation. What should the friar do? The friar says, come, young waver, go with me. In one respect, I'll thy assistant be. For this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor. So rancor there being like the anger and resentment that's built up in their families to pure love. He's going to do it. The friar's going to marry Romeo and Juliet. And Romeo says, oh, let's hurry. Let us hence. I stand in sudden haste. And the friar, this is another commonplace quote. I would write this in your notebook. Wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. Ooh, that's such good advice. If you are too hasty, you might not act prudently. You don't need to be in such a hurry when you're in love. You can take your time. Go slow, says the friar. Although he's a contradiction because he's going to marry them. So, but he does say go slow. They stumble that run fast. Why is the friar marrying them? And we'll discuss that in class. Read scene 3. One of the questions I have is, why doesn't he just say, no, let's discuss it together. Let's me and you, and then maybe me and Juliet, then maybe me and you and Juliet together discuss this. You're in love with each other. How can we approach your families? What can, like, is marriage like the answer? I'm wondering if Shakespeare would ask that question. Like, is this too hasty? Is this too fast? Is it too much like the lightning? So that's a question I think we should be asking. And I think something that Shakespeare is building up to, that this is like lightning, that this is quick, this is fast. We'll discuss it in class. This is a great scene. Feel free to read it. Please read it on your own. That is your assignment. And take notes, underline things, and we'll discuss it in class. All right, God bless you, and we'll see you for Act 2, Scene 4. As soon as I can figure out how to turn off this video. I have to click stop share. All right, God bless.